Welcome to the Launch School's first Employer Speaker Series, Women in Tech Panel. Presented by the Launch School Women's Group and hosted by Carolina Avila and Leah Davis. Joining us today are Patricia Lawless, Senior Engineering Manager at Mozilla. Maire Reavy, Director of Engineering for the Rendering and Cross-Org Platform teams at Mozilla. Trish, Director of Recruiting at Gatsby. We would like to give a special thanks to Stacy Cannon for giving us this incredible opportunity. Without further ado, let's begin.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'd like to start with Launch School's Women's Group mission statement. This informal meetup is a casual way to connect with other people from underrepresented genders, women, and non-binary folks in the Launch School community and talk about programming and master-based learning, as well as share experiences, challenges, tips, and more. Women and NB students in prep or any LS course are welcome to attend. So thank you everyone for joining us for our first Employer Speaker Series. Thank you, Patricia, Trish, and Maire for taking the time to be with us today. For those attending this webinar, we have left off extra time at the end of today's meeting for a live Q&A should you have additional questions.
All right, and with that being said, ladies, our first question is actually for each of you. Can you describe your role and what responsibilities your particular job entails? And let's go Maire, Patricia, then Trish.
Sure. I'm Director of Engineering for a good chunk of the engine that powers the Firefox web browser. Basically, I'm in charge of layout, graphics, media, so pretty much all the things that you see in here, that comes under me, as well as certain essential cross-org functionality, including performance and accessibility. So basically, I'm one of the people at Mozilla who helps make sure that Firefox ships and continues to get better and delight users.
Awesome.
Awesome. Wow, that's exciting. Patricia.
Sure. So I'm a senior manager of Firefox Performance. I manage all of the performance team, and we have engineers who diagnose and fix performance issues, as well as collaborate with other teams across Firefox to ensure that we continue to make Firefox faster. We also have a team of engineers who build tools and test infrastructure to measure performance, and how do we do that well and the right way and automated and everything else. So yeah, we just try to keep making Firefox faster.
Cool. Trish?
Hi, everyone. I'm Trish, and I lead the recruiting function here at Gatsby, which kind of speaks for itself. So I get to do all of the wonderful hiring and adding on new teammates and kind of thinking about how recruiting is the first glimpse into the world building for candidates, of how they might work and actually thrive at Gatsby.
Awesome. Okay, our next question is for you, Maire. What do you like most about your job?
The people. We have a great group of people at Mozilla. I love the culture, and the culture is thanks to the people. It's very supportive. I learn something new every day, things I want to learn. I also get a chance. My energy is constantly renewed from the people that I get to work with. It's very supportive. It's a very safe space psychologically. I feel comfortable pitching ideas and not always being right. In fact, I learn more when I'm wrong. And often we come up with better ideas as a result when people pitch ideas in a safe space and are wrong. Sometimes being wrong actually leads to something even better than any of us thought about. And I really believe that we live the principle of synergy. We're greater than the sum of our parts as together as a whole.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Maire. The next question is for Trish. What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
This is a great question. I think the hardest part of my job is to reconcile the company and hiring manager needs with the candidate needs. I feel like I am an equal advocate for both parties, and a lot of my work centers around building a really diverse pipeline and ensuring that our practices are equitable, that they are inclusive, that they help candidates feel like they belong and could see themselves at Gatsby. And sometimes the trade-off there is time to hire. In order to create a very intentional process, it requires planning, and it requires quite a bit of lift at the to front load. And sometimes that's challenging, getting hiring managers whom I empathize with, who are already, most of the times when teams hire, it's because they needed somebody like yesterday. And so I very much empathize with that need for speed. But I always try to reconcile with, yes, but how do we set up the candidate to succeed? And how are we ensuring that we are equitably assessing candidates from all backgrounds with there's different stages of our process. So that's challenging, but when it's done right, it's also very rewarding.
Great. That sounds great. Patricia, have you faced hardships because of your gender during your time working in the industry?
I'll get the fun one. Just kidding. So I would start by saying that I am fortunate that I don't have one of the horror stories that we hear about, headlines, things like that. Thankfully, I've had a long career in tech, and I don't have one of those stories, but I can point to times when I was maybe held back or underestimated by certain people. And whether they were peers or above me on the ladder or whatever. Early in my career, I would meet people who also, I was at Yahoo several years ago, and I would meet people like Yahoo was a large company. And so I'd be somewhere else and meet someone else who worked at Yahoo, and I'd tell them which group I was in. And they're like, oh, would ask me if I knew, and all the names that they would list were the product managers, because they assumed that I was product manager and not the tech lead or engineering manager for the team, which is actually the role I was in. I wouldn't call that a hardship, but you get that enough, and it kind of, it's the little paper cuts,
I hear you.
Yeah. So have I felt held back because of my gender at times? Yes, but overall, I feel fortunate to have found some very supportive managers and mentors along the way. Not everything's been easy, and some of it I look back on and I'm like, oh, I probably should have said more. But again, I don't have one of those headline horror stories, thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. I realized I wasn't checking in to see if anyone else wanted to add anything, so apologies, but just feel free to cut me off if you do want to add to a question. Okay, so the next one is for Maire. How important was a company's culture for you when you were on the job hunt in the past, and has it changed at all since then?
Culture is really important. I know that I'm the quality of my work, my creativity, my stamina is very much determined by the environment I'm in. I've learned that about myself. And so culture of support, culture of team. I love doing things with people. That's actually really important to me and my work. And so having great people to work with who bolster me and I bolster them, that's very important. And Mozilla was a great fit for me, still is. And I think now, if something were to happen where I was on the job market again, culture is even more important. In fact, if anything, now I've come to expect it. And I think one of the very good things about recent developments across the industry is D&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging is acknowledged as a key part of a healthy work environment. And I'm really happy, and that is essential and will be essential when I eventually do go look for a job again.
That's great. Okay, I'm going to check. No other questions came in. Okay, so I'll switch it over to Carolina.
Unmute myself. All right. Yes, so this question is for Trish. What are some red flags to watch out for from recruiters when going through the interview process?
There are many, I think. I think one is you kind of look at like the questions that they ask. That is very telling of what kind of what they might be assessing. When I've noticed that when recruiters ask very targeted questions and less like, what are your hobbies outside of work? It tells me that they value a very specific value, and they're trying to see if you align with that. And that is a good, I think, way for you to mutually assess whether those values also align with what you hold dear. Something that's really important to me, especially around culture, is being able, and I'm a mom, and so I very much value work-life balance. I very much value that being a mom, or like being like having to go out on maternity leave when I have my next child, that's not going to impede on my growth at the company, or that is not going to prevent me from having opportunities because I will be out on leave at some certain point. And so I always ask very targeted questions around what does work-life balance look like for you? And often if I hear a roundabout answer around we expect high performers who like to hustle, like all of those words, to me, that is like, that's an indication that maybe the expectation of this workload might not be aligned with the type of balance that I want to have for me and my family. And then also growth. I think it's really important, especially when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. If we are really setting candidates from historically excluded backgrounds to succeed, that there needs to be a clear path for growth. And so I always have my candidates ask, what does the growth path look like for me here in this role? And if the interviewer can very clearly explain to you where they think that growth potential is, and you feel like that growth potential for you is exciting, that's a good positive marker. And if it's a little bit more, and it's okay if it's ambiguous. A lot of startups, sometimes they don't know, but if there is an understanding of that, there is a path to growth and you're excited by that path, that's usually a good indication for me. So those are things that are important to me: work-life balance, culture, values alignment, and opportunities for growth.
Excellent. That's great input. Those are, it gives us good insight on what to ask in specifically as well, especially in terms of growth. So that's a really good one. Thank you, Trish. The next one is for Patricia. During the hiring process, what are some ways that you've seen a potential candidate get in their own way and not get hired, be it tech or soft skill related?
I think in the technical side of the interviews, not being just open with your thought process as you're working through the problem. It's sort of the show your work process, because often the technical questions, while it would be great to solve all of the problems and get an A+ on and get it runs and all the tests and everything, often that's sort of the bonus points. Really what the interviewers are looking for are, how do you approach the problem? How do you break it down? How do you correct yourself if you see you've made a mistake? How do you go back once you have something and it kind of works? What are you thinking about to make it better? Like, so approaching it that way and just being like, and now I'm looking at blah, 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 or now I'm thinking about what tests I want to write, or, just to let the interviewer know what your thought process is, because we're not mind readers.
Mm-hmm.
And from the non-tech side of things, not asking questions. I think it shows a certain level of engagement when you're asking questions. And also, I can't speak for all hiring managers, but I know that I like it when someone is curious. It shows that they want to dig in, they want to understand more, and that's a great quality to have in an engineer on my team. And so that always is like, even if the questions are about random things, but just like showing some curiosity, I think is great. So if you're not asking questions, it can kind of leave the interviewer feeling a little flat or questioning how engaged you are.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One other thing that I've seen too is a lot of the approaches now that are very popular, and one that I use is the STAR, where you basically give examples of your past projects as indicators of how you'll do on future projects. So a typical question would start off with, can you tell me about a time where you ran into a challenging problem that you didn't know the answer to? How did you solve it, or did you not solve it? What did you learn from it? And I have the person on the other side looking back at me like a deer in headlights, and they hadn't thought of, oh, I might get asked about projects that I've done. And they can be anything. They don't have to be about something you did at work. They could be a volunteer project. They could be a project you did in school. But thinking about those ahead of time and being ready to talk about them and some successes that you have really help, because I know when I'm looking to hire someone, I'm looking for, much like Patricia was saying, how do they think? How do they approach problems? Are they easily discouraged, or do they come up with a way to solve it, or to reach out to learn and grow? And are they comfortable sharing with it? Can they actually do an analysis afterwards in terms of what they learned from the project, what they do differently? It can be a real killer to an interview back and forth if you've got nothing to share. Oh, I can't think of anything. Then it's typically what you have to do then as an interviewer is just move on to the next question. So think about your successes going into interview questions.
Awesome. Yeah, I would also, I plus one all of that. I think whenever I coach candidates, I ask them, think about a project you're most proud of, and then really analyze, why are you proud of that project? And then think about the most challenging project that you've taken on. Why was it challenging? What did you learn? What do you do differently? And then lastly, think about something you're really excited to work on at this company, because that shows to the interviewer that you've done some research and that you're actually ecstatic about the role that you're applying for. And when you're asking questions, I always coach candidates, ask a question, one, about the interviewer. Why do they like working there, their culture? People generally you can hear the authenticity when people talk about what they love. And then you can glean whether that's something that aligns with what you love. And then 2, ask a question about the company. That shows that you've done your research, that you're interested. And then 3, ask a question about that team, because that shows that you care about the team that you're working on. And that will also give you a lot of information to make that mutual assessment.
Awesome. Thank you I'm not muted. Thank you so much for your input, ladies. I am going to remind everybody this is a recorded panel, and I will be rewatching this and taking my notes and listening. So thank you for that input. We do have a live question that is relevant to what we were discussing. We're going to go a little bit backtrack, and this question is for Trish. How do you ask questions about work-life balance without sounding like a slacker? My perspective has always been, if they take that question the wrong way, it makes it easy to weed out an environment that isn't good for me.
Yeah, I have always asked about this candidly. I think a signal for me, if that is their perspective, this might not be the place for me. And that in itself is telling. But another way to ask it is ask about very concretely, what does a day look like in this role? And how is success measured in the first month? And then from there, you can kind of glean, are they valuing volume and speed of output over the quality of output? Or are they evaluate, or do the day-to-day responsibilities from your experiences that seem like a manageable scope of work? So they're kind of like workaround questions that you can ask to get to where you want to. But I've always been pretty direct with that question of wanting to know what work-life balance looks like, because it is something that's very important to me.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have another added question from our live Q&A, and this is for Maire. On the tell me about a project that you were discussing just now, how detailed should I be prepared to go? How technical should the answer be versus higher level outlining thought process?
Sure. Good question. I usually recommend people have a 2 to 3 minute summary of beginning, a little bit of the middle, and then what you learned. Roughly 2 to 3 minutes, and be prepared to go deeper. Your interviewer will likely pull out certain things such as particular challenges, lessons learned, how you went about something. So the interviewer will give you feedback after your 2 to 3 minute summary of where they'd like to go deeper, and be engaged taking them there, especially if it's a project that you really loved doing. Let your enthusiasm come out. That speaks magnitudes to an interviewer. That's what we look for. We look for people who are going to have a lot of fun and really be engaged, and because we're really trying to find a good match for the company as well as the person. That's when you know you've got a great hire, when you have a need, and the person who you're interviewing fills that need and will be delighted to take that job.
I am looking at another live question.
I would just add really quickly on that one that having, like Maire said, like a 2 to 3 minute answer is a great place to start. And if the interviewer wants to dig deeper, they can ask you follow-up questions. Be prepared to go deeper, but also remember they might have a list of questions they're trying to get through. So let the interviewer, once you've given a reasonable answer, decide if they want to go deeper or not. Kind of.
Yeah, really good point. Really good point.
Let me just skim another one really quick. Okay, we'll move. Okay, we have one coming in right now. When we are being interviewed, how much can we assume that the interviewer knows about us? Did they skim our resume or look at the project, or they might know nothing about us? I think this was not directed to anybody. Sorry about that. Trish, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, I always coach my candidates to have your pitch, which is how do you pitch you in a really short amount of time. And that's usually what I share. If you are talking to specifically a recruiter, they might not have the technical background, and you want to be able to pitch something that is really digestible, that highlights kind of who you are and what your accomplishments are. Generally, all of my interviewers should have at least looked at your resume and should have looked at any of the projects you've submitted. Often, though, they might not have looked at previous notes from other interviewers to maintain just kind of that integrity of getting to meet you and not having any preconceived biases before interviewing you. And so sometimes they might not have some of that context. And I always share that if you have the same example use the same example for different interviewers, that's okay. Because chances are that example could be used for more than one question, and you don't need to come up with all of these different examples, so long as that's something that you feel really expresses your merit for that particular question. and I would say like kind of understanding your audience a little bit more. Like a hiring manager might want to dive into like how you collaborate on the team and how you might complement the team as well as your technical expertise. A recruiter is probably just looking at how well they think that you might complement the values and the organization and the team. And then if you get further along in the process where you're interviewing with members of the technical team, they're probably going to want you to go much deeper, and very similar to what Patricia and Maire shared, to be able to dive deep into how you would approach a problem, why you would approach it that way, how you digest feedback and then act on it in real time, and then what are your learnings, and then how do you come up with a solution based on those learnings. Normally, like Patricia said, the solution isn't the end goal, it's the how do you get there. That's the most important piece.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Trish. And we're going to go right back to you, Trish, and then I guess all of our panelists can answer this one as well. What are the biggest challenges you face when looking for a qualified candidate?
The biggest challenges for me is wanting to diversify my pool. And the challenge there is you're working against a lot of systemic issues that are just inherent, like that are barriers to candidates. For example, at Gatsby, it's very I'm very, if you were to ask me like where are our gaps, we don't have a ton of gender diversity on our engineering team. We don't have a lot of ethnic diversity on our exec team. Those are things that we are very aware of, and I am very aware of. And so when we are thinking about very critical positions, I actually encourage my hiring managers to think about the gaps on their teams. What perspectives are you missing? And this isn't a like, we need to hire from this particular group, but in a way it kind of is as well, because those are the perspectives that we're missing. And if we aren't explicitly identifying that those are the perspectives that we're missing, then we're never going to fill them. And so it's really about finding, fixing the top of the funnel, finding a really diverse pipeline, but also fixing the funnel itself. So how do we pass candidates through in a way that is equitable and assessing candidates fairly throughout. And sometimes I do run into issues of like, we're not going to find a certain type of candidate in a certain level because historically those candidates have been excluded from that type of work. And so the only way to do that is we have to be really mindful. So how do we bring those candidates up? How do we create growth opportunities so that they can grow and build and get to these kind of stakeholder table seats and really make a difference? And so that has always been challenging, because it's not just about sourcing and finding people, it's also about fixing the system that isn't so supportive of every type of candidate.
Yeah. Okay. And one other thing that I don't know if it's appropriate for this question, but one other thing I just wanted to highlight, especially when talking about like a qualified candidate. Many times diverse candidates tend not to apply for positions unless they feel they've met all the criteria listed on the job description. When really, if you're meeting 50 or 75%, you're doing great. And you should absolutely apply, especially if it's a job that really appeals to you and that you would love to grow into. I find it particularly challenging over the years to find diverse candidates because they exclude themselves. And there's a certain, I don't know what the right word is, but a certain courage, moxie with less diverse candidates to say, let me give it a shot. And really, it's often impossible to find someone who is a perfect match for a job description, and hiring managers know that. We're looking for potential. We're looking for people who are excited and willing to learn what they need to on the job in order to be successful. That's far more important than a checklist on a job description.
That's valid. Thank you so much. That's valuable answer.
May I add something as well?
Absolutely.
I really appreciate Maire for sharing that, because I think there's a lot of merit to that, and there's a lot of research behind how women, and specifically candidates from historically underrepresented groups, they need to meet 100% of the criteria, whereas most folks might meet 60% and say, good enough, let's do it. I also think that, okay, I'm losing my train of thought for a second there. So maybe you can come back to me.
No problem. Okay. We'll go on to the next question. I really want to know what that thought was, Trish. Okay, so we're going to move on to Patricia. What soft skills are the most crucial to succeeding in this career?
Great question. So I'll admit I'm biased. I like to find people who are leaders or willing to be leaders to some extent in their career. So to me, what that means, and I'm not saying that everyone needs to come in and be a manager or director or whatever. To me, what those leadership skills to me are often, I'm going to circle back to the footnote in my head, but are you willing to go talk to people, like reach out to people maybe you haven't met, ask questions, get curious. Again, a big value of mine is curiosity. Being willing to take initiative when you see something that needs to happen. And sometimes that means partnering with your manager or someone like that to find the right solution or the right way to approach it. But do that rather than just sit there and be annoyed that this thing seems broken and that kind of thing. So there's certain, I think that's the best way to describe what I would look for. But the footnote that I put in my brain, I wanted to circle back about calling it soft skills. And it's really leadership skills, which are not soft. These are actually some of the harder skills that a lot of people are not good at. And so it's a little bit of I don't know, it's that pebble in my shoe when I hear it called soft skills, because I'm like, are they soft though? Because this is what, if you talk to the typical, what has been the stereotypical engineer, white male, cisgender, all of that, right? Some of them are very good at these things, and many of them are like, I don't like to do that. Can I just, and they're hard skills. They're not soft.
+1, absolutely +1. In my experience, I would just add to Patricia's list, resilience. Keep getting back up. We all get knocked down.
Yeah.
And everybody feels imposter syndrome. It's okay. It's okay. And communication is the key to all of this. Communication is tough. Humans are tough. It is tough to hack humans. It's far tougher to hack humans than hack code. And that's a lot of what Patricia's, speaking to. And it's okay. If something makes you feel uncomfortable, say something. It's okay. It's better to talk through it respectfully, collaboratively, and come up with, a solution to whatever it is together. You'll be determined, be courageous. And people love that. People follow that. People seek that out. And each of you will find your own definition of what that means for you. But, just keep getting up. That's the key. That's why I'm still here.
Wow.
I remember what I was going to say now.
Awesome. Trish, go ahead.
Sorry, I haven't shared this with anyone, but I am pregnant, and so my brain is like all over the place.
Congratulations!
Thank you. I think I might be telling you before I tell like my grandparents. But So I'm a little scattered and I apologize for that. But what I was going to say about the whole job description thing, I always coach candidates, find 5 job descriptions that just like are super exciting to you, put them in a word cloud, and then you'll be able to see what the top like keywords are for those job descriptions. And you might realize that you have more of those keywords than you think. And you might also realize that maybe those are some keywords that you can build into your resume. And so that's something I always share as a great tip. And I agree with both what Patricia and Maire said. I always try to coach hiring managers in thinking about target profile beyond skills, because skills is the easiest thing to assess. You give somebody something, if they can do it or they can't do it. But what's harder to assess is like, I think about it as skills, motivation, complement, and trajectory. Motivation is, can they do the job? What motivates them to do the job? Are they intrinsically motivated by the mission? Are they motivated by growth? Like, what is it? And can you provide that? And then complement is, how are they going to complement your team? And how are they going to complement the manager's management style? How are they going to complement the culture there? And all of these things, are they setting up the candidate for success? And then lastly is that bit that Maire and Patricia talked about, which is like trajectory, which has all of those hard skills. How far have you come to get to where you are? And normally I found that if a candidate is lower in skills, but like has tremendous trajectory, those candidates do really well, because skill you can pick up. And the other things are not as easily teachable. And so I have been seeing a shift in recruiting in which people are putting more emphasis in these kind of harder to quantify pieces that I think are very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to add that to my list. That's great.
And one thing I just want to add too is it's easy to obsess over how many computer languages do I know? I will tell you that as a hiring manager for many years, if you can do one programming language well, you can do any of them. I'm not worried about somebody picking up a new programming language. It's the thought process. It's the, how do they go about problem solving? Do they give up or do they keep at it? Do they know when to reach out to others? Are they respectful? Are they humble? Are they also, do they also pay it forward? Do they try to help others? And once they've learned and they feel confident, do they try to help others? That's what I look for. And that's what I also try to teach other managers and leaders who I work with. That is my best advice also to other hiring managers.
Thank you, Maire. Well, the next question is for you, Maire. Was there ever a time that you were truly impressed by an engineer, and if so, why?
Yeah, definitely, and more than once, where they really went above and beyond to make sure that not only their own needs or own goals were met, but they had the team and the organization in mind. They saw, they really helped the team itself improve. They worried less about their own success. It was truly, they saw themselves as part of something bigger. And I've seen this, I've been fortunate enough to see this more than once in my career. And sometimes, a few times it's been at work, but also too in other projects, open source projects, things where it's like, I've seen people who've worked on something 4 months and realized, you know what, this isn't the right solution. This isn't what's going to be, this isn't the best path for accomplishing what we need to accomplish. And also, engineering managers who've said, oh, it's a tough decision, but we should shelve this because it's not what's going to be best. And that's, realizing that, you're part of something bigger that impacts more than just you. It impacts the user. Sometimes it impacts the world. that kind of holistic thinking really, really, really impresses me.
Great, thank you, Maire. Leah, go on ahead with the next set of questions.
I just want to quickly say we're not ignoring the questions in the Q&A. We're just going to try to save them for the live Q&A. Okay, so let me hurry up. So this one is for Trish. For someone who values inclusivity in the workplace, what's a tactful way to ask about how diverse a company's workforce is?
This is a really good question. I don't know if I have like a great answer about how to tactfully do that. I've always been pretty direct because as a recruiter, that's important to me. And I want to work for a company that cares about that. Because for me, my product is the company, it's the culture. If I can't speak authentically to why this company is great, then I feel like a used car salesman. And I never want to feel that way because I want to make sure that I'm setting my candidates up in the best place that they can succeed. So I've always asked about it candidly. But I think a way you could ask about it is like, what is the company's stance on DEIB? What is the company doing? And I think that in today's like landscape is a very fair question to ask. And you can, the answers you get might be really telling. I normally find that companies who walk the walk are ones who are willing to acknowledge where they need work. That happened at Gatsby, that happened at my last company. They didn't just tell me like, we really care about it. We have unlimited time off, we have like parental leave, all of these things, but they'll share with me also, our exec team is cisgendered white males. And I'm like, oh, okay. That is like, there's an acknowledgement that there's, there are challenges that need to be worked on. And so whenever I hear that things aren't perfect, that actually makes me more excited about the company, because when you can acknowledge that things aren't going well is where you can actually start making movement to make things better.
I hear you. Thank you. Okay, our next question is for Patricia. Do you have any general advice for women that have a gap in their work history and who are switching careers into web development?
Some general advice. I'm going to start with a short bit about myself. I'm in the second phase of my tech career. I have like a 7.5, 8-year chunk in the middle between the first phase and the second phase where I was not in tech. I went off and got certified as a life coach, and I did leadership training, and I had a food blog, and I did a bunch of other things. And coming back in, I was worried, like, am I going to be asked about that? And I think having an answer, like, what were you doing? Right. And it doesn't have to be I was just doing this, like it wasn't tech and therefore it's bad. It's no, this is what I chose to do with my life at that point. And now I'm here. Right. And here are some of the things I learned along the way. It's also a good thing to include, because whatever you're doing, you're learning something. Whether it's learning something about yourself or learning a new skill, and having an answer for what drew you to this new step you're taking. Like when I came back into tech, I was clear that I had missed being part of a team and I missed building things. And so I always made sure to mention that as like, this is why I'm here now. So I think that's probably about as general as I can get.
Okay. Thank you. That's great. We have one question that came up is, as someone who will be entering the field in my later 30s, how worried should I be about being discriminated or prejudiced against because of age? Oh, anyone can take that.
I will tell you that I don't consider late 30s to be old. So, but I can appreciate the fear. There's, will I be accepted? Will I belong? Will I get a chance? Will this in some way hold me back? I I will say that my experience is good hiring managers look for the things that we've been talking about for the last half hour, 45 minutes. Do you have can you demonstrate that you have some track history in being able to do some of what needs to be done for this job? And do you have the trajectory? If you have concerns that your age is being unfairly considered, and really it should have no bearing at all on your candidacy for the job, ask. And if you feel in any way uncomfortable, trust your gut. Making a choice to join a company, in my experience, it has certainly impacted my life every time I've done it. And so if you have any concerns, especially in this job market, keep looking, and know that you're going to be valued. When you find the right place, you're going to be valued, and age is not going to be an issue.
Thank you so much. That's really great. And this leads into my next question, which is for Trish. In your personal opinion, do you think age is an issue in the tech industry? And have you seen anything done to address it? If so.
Yeah, this is a great question. And like Maire mentioned, I think there's a lot of validity to this question. In startups I've worked at, I've had candidates ask me very candidly, I feel like I'm older than the general makeup of your company. And it seems like your company skews young. Like, how would you support someone like me? And I think that's a fair question. And it is a question that I think as recruiters, we need to really bring back to the company and be like, this is the optic. And so what are we doing as a company to further like support our teammates who may feel like they are other even before they come join us? And so I think this is a really valid question. And I know in startups, there's a lot of, there are a lot of particular, even in job descriptions, you hear ninja, rockstar, unicorn, hustle, self-starter, all of these terms that I think skew towards a very particular age demographic. And I'm starting to see folks deviate from that. And I'm seeing a trend where folks are focusing on the things that Patricia and Maire are talking about, focusing really on like understanding in this role, what skills and attributes would make someone successful. Let's index on those. And then everything else is kind of moot, really. If they can work well in your team and if they can do the job well, like all of the other stuff is moot. And I am starting to see more tools and more like we use Greenhouse as our applicant tracking system. And I'm really excited to roll out Greenhouse Inclusion, which actually helps us mitigate a lot of those biases where folks wouldn't be able to see name, gender, schools, all of that stuff. But I'm starting to see a shift, and I'm very excited about that shift. But I think this is a valid question, and your observations are probably very valid that a lot of startups skew young.
Thank you so much, Trish. Okay, and with that, we'll jump into our live Q&A. There are questions waiting. All right, take it away, Carolina.
Okay, the first live Q&A that we had, and we tried to incorporate some of the live Q&As that were relevant to what we were talking to at the moment. These may be a little bit random, but I'll just go for it. How accurate are the employer reviews on Indeed or places like that? Should we take them? Sorry, I just missed that one. Wait, can you paste that back again? Thank you. Should we take them with a grain of salt, assuming it's like the Yelp effect in that only the happiest and unhappiest employees review the employer? Okay, Trish looks like she wants to answer that. Go for it.
This is very relevant to Gatsby, especially. Gatsby had a very challenging reorganization about a year ago, and you can see that on Glassdoor. It's very obvious. People were unhappy. So I asked about it. I was very candid in my interview. I was like, so I read some of these things. Tell me about that. It wasn't, like that. I just Tell me more. And that's usually my coaching for interviewers too. Instead of asking a very targeted question, tell me more is sometimes more revealing. And I think if you see it, feel free to ask about it. Say, this is what I saw on Glassdoor. Tell me more about that. And the answer that you receive, I think that will be more authentic and more meaningful than what you actually see on a Glassdoor review. What I learned was that, yes, Gatsby did go through a really challenging time. There was a big shift. We had our first commercial product about a year ago. There was a big shift on the executive team. There was a big shift in culture. We got a new CEO. A lot of things happened. People were very unhappy. However, there was a huge learning too, and people were very open to sharing that with me, like sharing like that was really hard, these are the things that we didn't do well, and this is what we fixed, and here's where we are now, and this is how I feel about Gatsby currently. And I can feel that shift, and I can feel when people answer that question, there's like a relief, like that's who we were, but that's not who we are anymore. And so I would just recommend like asking, like, this is what I saw, tell me more about that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think just emphasizing that, look at the dates of when, you know, the reviews are happening. Was there any headline for that company in particular? I know that if there has been a layoff or there's been some other reorg, like Trish is talking about, that's when you get kind of the influx of reviews. That doesn't mean ignore all of them, but it's kind of like when I look at a restaurant on Yelp, I look for the highest and the lowest and look for patterns. Is there something that's repeated often? You know, like if the lowest reviews always say service is very slow, then I'm going to be like, oh, well, maybe they're a little slower. But if all the highest is the best food I've ever had, I might still check it out, you know.
Yeah, +1. To me, it's a data point. You shouldn't ignore it, but you shouldn't over-rotate.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is, could you share something helpful, valuable you learned from your first interviews back when you were starting off? How did you overcome beginner's anxiety and manage to impress the interviewer? And this is directed to any of the panelists that would like to answer. So does anybody want to answer this one?
It's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to, and ask questions. Like, for example, if you feel well prepared for an interview, but you just get thrown, it's okay to say, I don't think I'm answering your question the way you're expecting or the way you need me to, and ask follow-up questions. The best interviews are conversations, and I didn't realize that until several years into my career. Really, the interviewer, their job is to get to know you in a half hour, 45 minutes, if we're lucky, an hour. You know, who are you as a person, as a worker? There's so many things we're trying to find out, and we're not expecting perfection. And early on, I thought I had to be perfect. And if I came out of an interview and I didn't nail all the questions, I was a failure. It's like, no. It really, you've had a great interview if you've come out as the candidate, knowing more about the company, understanding what the role is, and if you had if you and the interviewer had a great discussion, and you were able to show off enough of your expertise that they're like, yeah, good problem solver. Clearly took on these projects and understood the ins and outs and what worked, what didn't. Yeah. And in terms of prepare, my best advice is practice in front of a mirror. Imagine you're the interviewer. What would you ask yourself? And what would impress you as the interviewer?
Excellent. Thank you, Maire.
Just want to add real quick. I agree with everything Maire said. The one thing that it's similar, but maybe nuanced difference, when I was starting out going into interviews, actually for many years in my career going into interviews, I approached it as if the interviewer had all of the all the power, all of the say, they were in charge. They were the ones I had to, I had to prove myself, but also it was do or die kind of, right? They were the arbiter of everything. And the reality is you have an equal seat at the table and you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. I know often interviewers have a long list of questions and they leave you the 5-10 minutes to ask yours, but as Maire said, it is a conversation. It's and you're getting to know about them as well. And it's okay if you reach the end of the interview and go, you know what, I don't want to work for that company. So
Yeah.
I would say that if you get to the end and you realize you don't want to work for them, that's a successful interview. You determine like this is the right place for you. I would also, I agree with all of that. And I think to another point to Maire's point is it's okay to ask, like, can I have a couple of minutes to think about this? Sometimes I'll even offer that to candidates if it seems like my question, like they give me that face or they're like, oh, they need some time. I'll be like, yeah, take a couple of minutes to think about it. And that's okay. I think again, you want to set yourself up to succeed. And if that you need that, I don't think that is a detriment to the interview.
Just to pile on that as well. I'm an introvert. I need a moment to think. I often will pause before I speak, and letting your interviewer know, like, let me think about that for a moment, or, oh, that's a good question, and buy yourself a little bit of time, like have something to say to kind of give yourself that little bit, because you don't have to, it's not school where you have to recite the multiplication tables or whatever it is, right? I hope none of you had to do that. I had to do that. Yes.
Next question we have from the live Q&A is, how do you balance having a tech job, being a valuable team member, and being able to take care of kids or be with I'll add if you don't have kids, or be with your family, spending time with them? I'm going to pick on Patricia this time.
Yeah. So early in my career, I didn't balance anything and I burnt out badly and then left for 7.5 to 8 years. So, yeah. Finding the schedule that works for you and the company. You do still work for the company, but hopefully there's enough flexibility in there that if you have young kids and you need to get them ready for school or daycare or whatever it is in the morning, maybe you're able to schedule things so that you don't have anything until after all of that. Or if you have dinner at a set time because your kids are at that age, also being able to block off your calendar to say, this is family time. And hopefully, not every company is going to do this, but I think more and more companies are recognizing that we are whole people and we have lives and we're better workers if we can balance those things. So knowing what works for you, making sure that you are clear of what's the most important things for you and your family, and working that out with your manager or your team, like, hey, I'm available, but I need this hour to go to whatever.
Yeah.
All right.
I think, may I add?
Absolutely. Please.
I think it goes back to, I was coach, again, candidates when they're thinking about the job search and they start their job search, I always ask them, what are your values? What is most important to you? And if, it's family, it's kids, then that needs to be a part of your whole assessment process when you are looking at companies. Because again, very similar to what Patricia and Maire said, it's a mutual selection process. And the landscape is pretty competitive. And so companies are turning that corner, but that was really important to me. I have a toddler and about to have another one. And that was really important that I had time to be with them And my toddler was home with me for 2 years of the pandemic while we were working. So my husband and I we were juggling, like actually passing him from one person to the other between meetings, and had to schedule our whole day like around like who could take care of him and who had a meeting. And that was just our lives for 2 years. And it was a lot. And I think companies are recognizing that, when you support your employees fully, that they are more successful and it's a better return, honestly. And so I would say ask those hard-hitting questions. Make sure that the company values that and in turn creates a sustainable place for you to thrive and for your family to thrive.
+1. Yeah. And also realize too that having kids, having a life outside of work actually adds to your value as a diverse employee. Actually, your life experience as a parent adds to your strengths as an employee. You learn things. I know this. I have 2 of my own. You learn things as a parent that you can't learn any other way, and that actually does help you in tackling other problems in life, including problems on the job. And it's okay. Early in my career, I felt the need to hide the fact that I was a mom because I felt that made me somehow less desirable as an employee. I don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to. And I am happier and more productive for it. So as be clear on what your priorities are, and people will respect that, especially the right company. And companies are quickly realizing that a workforce that has a good work-life balance is actually a happier, more productive workforce.
Great. Thank you for sharing all that. All right. We have time for one more question before we go, and that is for all 3 of you. So I will go ahead and pick. We'll start with Maire, and then Patricia, and then Trish. Is there something you wish you'd known or a skill you wish you had when you started your career?
Yeah, definitely. I mentioned it earlier in this call, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Everyone has imposter syndrome, and it's okay. It's okay to say I don't know. What I wish somebody had told me at the very beginning is ask yourself what you love to do, and then try hard to find a job that lets you do that most of the time. And what you do combined with the impact you have is far more important than where you come from or what your background is. And also realize too that your experience, whatever that experience may be, is gold. It's golden. I mean, when we talk many times when companies talk about diversity, certainly when I talk about diversity, I talk about your life experience and all of your life experience, whether it's professional or otherwise, because that bringing all of that to your job actually makes, as a whole person, makes you so valuable. And so don't feel that you have to hide who you are. Don't do anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. Trust your gut. Your gut is your friend, but also realize you're more valuable than you realize, and believe that. Be resilient. Don't give up. That's what I would say to my younger self if I could.
I think I would agree with most of that. I think one thing that I would add for myself would be I wish I'd known how valuable the relationships are that you make throughout your career, and that I had invested more earlier in my career in some of those relationships, be it with your peers or your managers or whoever they are. The tech industry is making it a smaller and smaller world, and you never know right? I'm not saying that you need to always be networking or anything like that. When you put it in the phrase networking, I cringe and I kind of back away. But if you just tell me I need to get to know people and build relationships, I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So it's not for any nefarious purpose, but at some point, if for no other reason, it's nice to be able to reach out to somebody. You may be at different companies now and go, hey, how are things going? What is it like there? Because I'm just trying to figure out, is my company doing weird stuff or whatever it is, right? But invest in those relationships.
Trish?
Yeah, as a recruiter, I always tell people I'm pretty introverted and I can turn it on because I have to for my job, but then I get real tired and I turn it off. So when Patricia said networking, I had an internal eye twitch. But I do agree that those relationships are really important, and I think the more transparency we have, especially as we are trying to uplift one another, I am a big advocate for pay transparency, for example. I want to ensure that we are making sure that candidates know that they are being paid fairly and that aligns with what their expectations are before they even get a chance to talk about the role, because that's important. I would say know your worth is a big one, that no one really knows what they're doing all the time. and that's okay. I think the curiosity and the eagerness to learn is just as important as knowing what the roadmap is. And then also, I think something that I really struggled with. So I used to be a high school English teacher, and I taught in the same kind of low income community that I grew up in. And for a long time, my job was my identity. And I made that a reflection of who I was. So if I wasn't performing well in my job, I was a terrible person. And I brought that with me for a long time. And now I'm much more, I think my priorities have shifted, but now I'm much more my job, I want to enjoy it. I want to feel like I'm making an impact, but it doesn't define me. And it's not who I am. It's an important part of me, but it's not who I am fully. And that took a long time, I think.
All right, ladies. Thank you for sharing that. And something I picked up on while Patricia and Trish were talking specifically was you both are career transitioners, and Leah and I are career transitioners. We have a few career transitioners in launch school. So just to see where you both are, where you all three are, is super inspiring. Your answers were excellent. And like I said, I will parse through this. I'm sure many launch school students, I'm so glad we're recording this because your answers are so valuable. So thank you, ladies, so much for your time today. Unfortunately, we didn't get through all the live Q&As, but we will definitely be recording them for future employer speaker series that we will have. So thank you, ladies, for everything that you shared with us today. We really appreciate your input and your time. We would also like to thank one more time Stacey Cannon, and thank you to Chris Lee for creating this opportunity for us. And we also want to thank all our peers for attending. Thank you for attending this panel. And again, I am just floored by everything you guys said. Leah, I think you are too.
Yes, I definitely need to rewatch this because there was just a lot of golden nuggets. Oh my goodness, it's really good.
Yeah, and we're also moderating, so it's definitely going to be parsing through this. Thank you all so much.
This has been the first Employer Speaker Series Women in Tech panel presented by the Launch School Women's Group. Thank you for watching.